Hey, shalom, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, call Allah Yahweh, Shem Yahweh Shai, Shem Gosh, and of course, double honors go out to the apostles and elders, great millstone, who continue to teach us His truth through the Holy Spirit. This is Naaman with DC Camp. And lo and behold, now we have this Juneteenth holiday now, by decree of Congress and President signed off on it, like whatever, you know. But I was watching Democracy Now! Earlier this morning, and this young man by the name of Clint Smith, he's local. I'm here in the district, Washington D.C. He's in just up the way in Silver Spring, Maryland, and he's going to shed some more light on this. And I'm just sitting here thinking, boy, our people are just gluttons for punishment. You're still depending on, or relying rather, on this devil that just hates you and is still trying to do everything in his power, even though he's being slick about it now, with trying to keep you in bondage with this jab. All right, I hope you realize that that's what this is all about. Like ancient Pharaoh in ancient Egypt, this devil does not want to let us go. And like the last Pharaoh, there are penalties, there are things that are going to happen, all right, to him uh, because of that. No matter how much some of our people love this devil, he's going down. There's nothing he can do about it. His plans are not going to succeed. A lot of us are going to fall by the wayside, all right? I.e., going to die, going to get tortured, whatever have you, all right? Just so that you know that this is not going to be a cakewalk. I keep in all my videos lately, I've been saying there's a reason Daniel the 12th chapter, verse 1 is there. I implore you to read it, all right? The time is coming, it's going to be unlike any that's ever been on the earth. The reason being, this devil, this Edomite, this so-called white man, wants to hang on to what he's got. All right, he's going to pull out all the stops, as they say. Kid gloves are coming off, however you want to phrase it. In other words, we are in trouble. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and let this play. This is Democracy Now! And it says Clinton Smith on Juneteenth and reckoning with the history of slavery across America. They do not want this coming out. People, they're even talking about having teachers who are talking about their, what do they call it now? Simply put, it's the truth of what they did to our people, but they don't want this taught in school. It's called critical race theory. There's nothing theoretical about it. It's what actually happened. But they're trying, see, they've lost the ability to solely control the narrative. And there's no way to sugarcoat or uh, cushion the blow uh, in telling the story of what they did to us. That veil, we always read Isaiah 25 and 7. People around the world were under the spell. This so-called white man could do no harm. He was just the image that he portrayed. You know, everybody fell for that, and he was just looked up to. But now, that veneer, that that cloak, that veil is being raised, and you're starting to see all the nastiness, filthiness, and it is for what it is. All right. And now people are saying we fell for this. Your democracy, that's his wine, that's his doctrine. All right. Now women are out of order. Men want to be women. Women want to be men. You know, it's that scripture, Psalms 82 and five, the foundations being offset. All right, certain things that a man and a woman, that is a foundation. Now they're saying there's multiple. Uh, it's just crazy. Let's go ahead and roll this.
The Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman. On Thursday, President Biden signed legislation to create a new federal holiday to commemorate Juneteenth, which marks the end of slavery in the United States. The Juneteenth celebration dates back to the last days of the Civil War, when Union soldiers landed in Galveston.
So grateful. All right. That's finally did it. Oh, Lordy, Lordy, Lordy. I thought she was going to pass out.
In Texas on June 19, 1865, with news that the war had ended and enslaved people learned they were freed 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. Juneteenth is the first new federal holiday since Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day was created nearly 40 years ago. President Biden spoke at the ceremony at the White House Thursday.
Juneteenth marks both the long, hard night of slavery and subjugation and a promise of a brighter morning to come. This is a day of profound, in my view, profound weight and profound power. A day in which we remember the moral stain, the terrible toll that slavery took on the country and continues to take.
Bear with me. Maybe it's just me, but is it just me, or is this devil's words just strained? It's like, I would rather be anywhere but here. I would rather be having a root canal. Maybe it's just me that it's coming through to me as if I'm looking at the expression on his face, his body language, his tone. Maybe it's just me.
What I've long called America's original sin.
The bill to make Juneteenth a federal holiday was passed by a unanimous vote in the Senate. But in the House, 14 Republicans, all white men, voted against the holiday. At Thursday's White House ceremony, Vice President Kamala Harris spoke about how enslaved people in Texas were held for over 2 years after President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation.
For more than 2 years, the enslaved people of Texas were kept in servitude. For more than 2 years, they were intentionally kept from their freedom. For more than 2 years. And then on that summer day, 156 years ago, the enslaved people of Texas learned the news. They learned that they were free, and they claimed their freedom. It was indeed an important day.
See, this is the thing. Let me get it real quick. This is on Lamentations 4th chapter. You keep relying on people that can't stand to even look at you, can't stand the sight of us. I don't keep saying that you because I'm still here. All right? And you keep expecting them to perform some kind of miracles when they don't want to acknowledge what they've done, what they continue to do. All right? This is Lamentation chapter 4, verse 17. As for us, our eyes, our people, our nation, as yet failed for our vain help. In our watching, we have watched for a nation that could not save us, nor do they want to. Face it, we're the goose that lays the golden egg, so to speak. They make money off of us no matter what. They exploit us. That's going in Habakkuk 2nd chapter. That's what this devil throughout his rulerships, that's his MO. One of them. All right? The Greek Empire, the ancient Roman Empire, the revived Roman Empire, what we're in now. You know, Habakkuk's second chapter talks about, I believe it's the fifth verse, it talks about he heaps all nations unto himself. Let's get that real quick. This is something that, if you check your history, let's see. Yeah, here it is. It started 4. It says, behold, his soul which is lifted up is not upright in him, but the just shall live by his faith. All right? Yea, also because he transgresseth by wine, as his philosophy and doctrine, he is a proud man. There's none more proud than the so-called white man. Neither keepeth at home. He's in everybody's business throughout the world. You need to do things like this, like we do. Uphold democracy. And people start following after his image. It says, who enlargeth his desire as hell and is as death, and cannot be satisfied, but gathereth unto him all nations, and heapeth unto him all. All right, back to the video. All right.
To talk more about Juneteenth and the legacy of slavery, we're joined by the writer and poet Clint Smith. He's author of the new book, How the Word is Passed, a reckoning with the history of slavery across America. He's also a staff writer at The Atlantic. Clint Smith, welcome to Democracy Now! It's great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
So one of the chapters in your book is Galveston Island. And that is where Juneteenth comes from. Can you tell us the story in full of Juneteenth and your feelings today? This is the first day the federal holiday is being celebrated because June 19th actually falls on a Saturday.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I went to Galveston, Texas. I've been writing this book for 4 years, and I went 2 years ago, and it was marking the 40th anniversary of when Texas had made Juneteenth a state holiday, and it was the Al Edwards prayer breakfast. The late Al Edwards Sr. is the state legislator, black state legislator, who made possible and advocated for the legislation that turned Juneteenth into a holiday, state holiday in Texas. And so I went in part because I wanted to spend time with people who were the actual descendants of those who had been freed by General Gordon Granger's General Order Number 3. And it was a really remarkable moment because I was in this place, on this island, on this land, with people for whom Juneteenth was not an abstraction. It was not a performance. It was not merely a symbol. It was part of their tradition. It was part of their lineage. It was an heirloom that had been passed down and that had made their lives possible. And so I think I gained a more intimate sense of what that holiday meant. And to sort of broaden out more generally, you spoke to how it was more than 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, and it was an additional 2 months after General Robert E. Lee surrendered at Appomattox, effectively ending the Civil War. So it wasn't only 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation; it was an additional 2 months after the Civil War was effectively over. And so, for me, when I think of Juneteenth, part of what I think about is both andedness of it. That it is this moment in which we mourn the fact that freedom was kept from hundreds of thousands of enslaved people for years and for months after it had been attained by them. And then at the same time, celebrating the end of one of the most egregious things that this country has ever done. And I think what we're experiencing right now is a sort of marathon of cognitive dissonance in the way that is reflective of the Black experience as a whole, because we are in a moment where we have the first new federal holiday in over 40 years, and a moment that is important to celebrate the Juneteenth and to celebrate the end of slavery, and to have it recognized as a national holiday. And at the same time that is happening, we have a state-sanctioned effort across state legislatures across the country that is attempting to prevent teachers from teaching the very thing that helps young people understand the context from which Juneteenth emerges. And so I think that we recognize that as a symbol, Juneteenth is not that it matters, that it is important, but it is clearly not enough. And I think what the fact that Juneteenth has happened is reflect.
See, this, no matter, This is why we got to get away from this devil. You cannot make someone who does not view you first and foremost as even being a human being. Right? You cannot make that person feel empathy where there is none to begin with. Right? They're never going to, let alone sympathize with you. They damn sure can't empathize with you. Right? You just can't do it. This man is incapable of that. I mean, you can go into a little psychology, I know, with sociopaths and psychopaths and all that crap. But motherfucker is just evil when it comes down to it. They are the wicked. Point blank, period. All right? You can't let them off the hook with all these fancy, clinical, terms. No, they're just wicked, evil, nasty people. All right? And I personally cannot wait till they get their comeuppance.
Perspective of a shift in our public consciousness, but also of the work that Black Texans and Black people across this country have done for decades to make this moment possible.
And can you explain more what happened in Galveston in 1865, and even, as you point out, what the Emancipation Proclamation actually did 2.5 years before?
Right. So the Emancipation Proclamation is often a widely misunderstood document. So it did not sort of wholesale free the enslaved people throughout the Union.
Do you understand that now, what we've been trying to tell you people? Emancipation in itself does not mean free. All right? It was a transfer from private ownership. You got to understand the history of what was going on. Even the, how am I going to say it? The business dealings that the South were having with Britain. Britain was just on standby, just, waiting for the South to. Actually, they thought they were going to win, but it didn't turn out that way. All right, because they were making buku money. All right, but that whole Civil War was more of a police action. All right, because the bankers, we're talking about the elites. All right, again, we're going into covenant, and we're going into, I just read part of Habakkuk, the 2nd chapter. You can also Malachi, the 2nd chapter. Man, that's what this man is known for. He's a covetous. All right. Let me see if I can remember that again. Woe unto him. Wait a minute. There's no more. Oh, Sirach 10. Hold on. This is Sirach 10. And we're going to go all the way down here. I as well start at 7. It says, pride, this is Sirach or Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verse 7. Pride is hateful before the Most High man, and by both doth one commit iniquity. Because of unrighteous dealings, injuries, and riches got by deceit, the kingdom is translated from one people to another. So this is the why. It says, 9, why is earth and ashes proud? What do we have to be proud for? Especially this devil. There's not a more wicked thing than a covetous man. He's not only covetous, I'll go one. Let's go for avarice. Avarice, extreme greed for wealth or material gain. I'm sorry, it's a lot. Extreme greed for wealth or material gain. That's actually what this. Look at this. Covetousness. That's what it's pointing to. Avariciousness, rapaciousness, materialism. That's all this society, that's all this democracy promotes at the end of the day. Me, myself, and I. iPhone, Instagram, Facebook. Get the picture?
Did not free enslaved people in the Union. In fact, there were several border states that were part of the Union that continued to keep their enslaved laborers, states like Kentucky, states like Delaware, states like Missouri. And what it did was it was a military edict that was attempting to free enslaved people in Confederate territory. But the only way that that edict would be enforced is if Union soldiers went and took that territory. And so part of what many enslavers realized, right, and realized correctly, was that Texas would be one of the last frontiers that Union soldiers would be able to come in and enforce the Emancipation Proclamation, if they ever made it there in the first place, because this was 2 years prior to the end of the Civil War. And so you had enslavers from Virginia and from North Carolina and from all of these states in the Upper South who brought their enslaved laborers and relocated to Texas in ways that increased the population of enslaved people in Texas by the tens of thousands.
Therefore, I don't know if he's going to get into that, leading into what's come up lately also in regards, we had years earlier, people don't recognize or realize, with the Alamo in the 1830, I think it was 36, all right? So we're talking almost 30 years, all right, before. Again, they made the claim that the Civil War didn't have anything to do with slavery, it was states' rights. No. When you get into, what is it called? The, was it Articles of Secession? What was it called? They make it clear that it was. I think I got the right name. All right. And the daughters, is that what they're called? Of the Confederacy, they were more or less responsible for shaping the school curriculum in the South. So after the Civil War, guess what? They started to change the narrative and trying to garner sympathy for the South's point of view, right? So some will say, well, yeah, the South lost the war, but they won everything else. There's some truth to that. Right? That's why you have to be on point, because this devil is a devil. He's a liar and deceiver. That's all devil means.
And so when Gordon Granger comes to Texas, he is making clear and letting people know that the Emancipation Proclamation had been enacted in ways that, because of the topography of Texas and because of how spread out and rural and far apart from different ecosystems of information many people were, a lot of enslaved people didn't know that the Emancipation Proclamation had happened. And some didn't even know that General Lee had surrendered at Appomattox 2 months prior. And so part of what this is doing is making clear to the 250,000 enslaved people in Texas that they had actually been granted freedom 2.5 years prior, and that the war that this was all fought over had ended 2 months before.
At Thursday's presidential signing ceremony, Joe Biden got down on his knee to greet Opal Lee, the 94-year-old activist known as the grandmother of Juneteenth. This is Biden speaking about Lee.
As a child growing up in Texas, she and her family would celebrate Juneteenth. And Juneteenth, 1939, when she was 12 years old, a white mob torched her family home. But such hate never stopped her, any more than it stopped the vast majority of you I'm looking at from this podium. Over the course of decades, she's made it her mission to see that this day came. It was almost a singular mission. She's walked for miles and miles, literally and figuratively, to bring attention to Juneteenth, to make this day possible.
And this is Opal Lee speaking at Harvard School of Public Health earlier this week.
I don't want people to think Juneteenth is just one day. There is too much educational components. We have too much to do. I even advocate that we do Juneteenth, that we celebrate freedom from the 19th of June to the 4th of July. We were free on the 4th of July, 1776. That would be celebrating freedom. You understand? If we were able to do that.
And that is Opal Lee, considered the grandmother of Juneteenth. And Clint, one of the things you do in your book is you introduce us to grassroots activists. This doesn't come from the top. This comes from years of organizing, as you point out, in Galveston itself, and with people like, not that there's any...
And you get these old mother dears or Medeas like this, and they're reverenced, and I mean, it's just like, why don't you just sit the hell back? You have no idea of the damage that's been done. All right. Again, Juneteenth. But this is how simple our people have become. All right. But again, they'll listen to everybody else except the ones that are trying to tell them the truth, and that's us. Trying to let you know who you really are. You are not an African. It's more to you than slavery. That's part of you, yeah, but you got to understand why that happened. We're trying to tell you that. You won't listen.
Anyone like Opal Lee.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Part of what this book is doing, it is an attempt to uplift the stories of people who don't often get the attention that they deserve in how they shape the historical record. So that means the public historians who work at these historical sites and plantations. That means the museum curators. That means the activists and the organizers, people like Take 'em Down Nola in New Orleans, who pushed the city council and the mayor to make possible the fact that in 2017 these statues would come down, several Confederate statues in my hometown in New Orleans. And part of when I think about someone like Miss Opal Lee, part of what I think about is our proximity to this period of history, right? Slavery existed for 250 years in this country and has only not existed for 150. And, you know, the way that I was taught about slavery growing up in elementary school, we were made to feel as if it was something that happened in the Jurassic Age, that it was the Flintstones, the dinosaurs, and slavery, almost as if they all happened at the same time.
Good point.
But the woman who opened the National Museum of African American History and Culture alongside the Obama family in 2016 was the daughter of an enslaved person. Not the granddaughter or the great-granddaughter or the great-great-granddaughter, the daughter of an enslaved person is who opened this museum, the Smithsonian, in 2016. And so there's clearly,
Mitch McConnell,
for so many people,
Senator Mitch McConnell.
there are people who are alive today who were raised by, who knew, who were in community with, who loved. People who were born into intergenerational chattel bondage. And so this history that we tell ourselves was a long time ago wasn't in fact that long ago at all. And part of what so many activists and grassroots public historians and organizers across this country recognize is that if we don't fully understand and account for this history that actually wasn't that long ago, that in the scope of human history was only just yesterday, then we won't fully understand how our contemporary landscape of inequality today. We won't understand how slavery shaped the political, economic, and social infrastructure of this country. And when you have a more acute understanding of how slavery shaped the infrastructure of this country, then you're able to more effectively look around you and see how the reason one community looks one way and another community looks another way is not because of the people in those communities, but is it because of what has been done to those communities generation after generation after generation.
Exactly, but they want to promote this holocaust bullshit every year. Now, I hope you realize, that's a whole nother video, that was done on purpose, because you have people from other cultures that will comment. And I'm thinking of Ho Chi Minh, as in Vietnam, that made a comment. Now, he was with Marcus Garvey. People don't know that. And he made comments to the effect that we were and are at his time, we still are, the most oppressed people on the face of the earth. All right? But what do you have people refer to most? And that's the Holocaust, because it draws attention away from us and puts it on our enemies. These are the ones that were responsible for bringing us over here in the first damn place. They stole our identity. But when you tell this truth, you get labeled as telling you what these people did and continue to do to my people. They're the ones behind these policies and these fucked up ass laws. All right, what better way to keep track, all right, of the people that whose identities you stole? Keep an eye on them. I exploit you in every way at the same time. So you're not looking at it like that.
Generation. And I think that that is central to the sort of public pedagogy that so many of these activists and organizers who have been attempting to make Juneteenth a holiday and bring attention to it as an entry point to think more wholly and honestly about the legacy of slavery have been doing.
During an interview on CNN, Democratic Congressmember Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez called out the 14 Republican Congress members, all white men, who voted against making Juneteenth a federal holiday.
This is pretty consistent with, I think, the Republican base, and it's whether it's trying to fight against teaching basic history around racism and the role of racism in U.S. history to, you know, there's a direct through line from that to denying Juneteenth, the day that is widely recognized and celebrated as the symbolic kind of day that to represent the end of slavery in the United States.
If you could respond to that, Clint Smith, and also the fact that on the same day yesterday, the Senate Minority Leader said they would not be supporting the For the People Act, the Voting Rights Act.
Absolutely. I think very clearly the critical race theory, the idea of it is being used as a boogeyman, and it is being misrepresented and distorted in way by people who don't even know what critical race theory is, right? So we should be clear that the thing that people are calling critical race theory is just, that is the language that they are using to talk about the idea of teaching any sort of history that rejects the idea that America is a singularly exceptional place. And that we should not account for the history of harm that has been enacted to create opportunities in intergenerational wealth for millions of people that has come at the direct expense of millions and millions of other people across generations. And so part of what is happening in these state legislatures across the country, and with regard to the effort to push back against teaching of history, 1619 Project, critical race theory, and the like, is a recognition that we have developed in this country a more sophisticated understanding, a more sophisticated framework, a more sophisticated public lexicon with which to understand how slavery, how racism was not just an interpersonal phenomenon, it was a historic one. It was a structural one. It was a systemic one. And I'm very much sympathetic. I know there's some sentiment out there that people are saying, well, you know, we didn't ask for Juneteenth to become a holiday. We want voting rights. We want police reform. We want abolition. We want, and I'm 100% understand that. I also think that we should not undervalue what it means for Juneteenth to become a holiday, in part because then we are not valuing the work that Black activists have done over the course of decades to get there, and because while symbols are not necessarily material change, they are not irrelevant.
Let me stop it right there. Let's go to Acts. That's why nothing is going to work. That's why Marcus Garvey and all those other people. Remember Deuteronomy 28:68. All right, no man will buy you. No man will be able to save you, redeem you. This is Acts 5:38. It says, "And now I say unto you, refrain from these men, and let them alone. For if this counsel or this work be of men, it will come to naught." It's not going to work. But if it be of the Most High, ye cannot overthrow it, lest happily ye be found even to fight against the Most High. These things are set up because at the end of the day, this is punishment for us. Think Romans 13th chapter. This, as wicked as it is, this is set up. All right. So you cannot count on another man or men to get us out of this. All right. This is spiritual.
So I think all the time about having grown up in New Orleans, and to get to school, I had to go down Robert E. Lee Boulevard. To get to the grocery store, I had to go down Jefferson Davis Highway. That my middle school was named after a leader of the Confederacy. That the street my parents live on today.
And here, that's another point he makes. You not accounting for the mental aspect of this. Constantly seeing, like he said, you're being raised. I grew up, Albert Pike Boulevard, all this other shit, as he's going into Jefferson Davis, here in Alexandria, Virginia, you got, Jefferson Davis Highway and all this. You see, and it's constantly, these are people that hated us, that literally had it in for us, all right? And we got to constantly see this shit. And you complain about statues and shit being torn down, but if that were so-called Jewish people, nobody be complaining. You see where this is, how fucked up this is? Here you have a people, these devils that stole our identity and are pretending, occupying our homeland, calling themselves us, constantly rubbing it in our face. Hey, 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 hey. We gotta, in order to survive, deal with these motherfuckers. You don't see how fucked up this is? But then again, here we are. This is Jeremiah. This is Jeremiah 15:5. It says, "For who shall have pity upon thee, O Jerusalem?" Jerusalem being a people before it's a place. "Or who shall bemoan thee? Or who shall go aside to ask how thou doest?" And you wonder why. You have to wonder why our people are all fucked up on drugs, looking for an escape. And they know this. That's why it's put in our neighborhoods. Totally taking advantage of something they initiated to get us locked up, to break up our families. The war on drugs wasn't a war on drugs, it was a war on our people.
Is named after somebody who owned 150 enslaved people. And the thing is that names and symbols and holidays aren't just names and symbols and symbolism. What they are reflective of the stories that people tell. And those stories shape the narratives that societies carry. And those narratives shape public policy, and public policy, that shapes the material conditions of people's lives, which is not to say that taking down a statue of Robert E. Lee or making Juneteenth a holiday is going to erase the racial wealth gap. Of course not. But what it is part of an ecosystem of narratives and stories and ideas that can help us recalibrate our understanding of why certain communities look the way that they do and what needs to be done and invested in those communities to create a new set of opportunities. So we should recognize and celebrate that Juneteenth is a holiday, and we should also recognize that that is not enough. It is not nearly enough, and that it is one part of a much longer struggle and a much larger struggle to make sure that we are creating a more equitable and just world.
And that was pointed out earlier this week by the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Nikole Hannah-Jones, who's been denied tenure at University of North Carolina, all in this time, though there's a mass effort to turn that around. She spoke to MSNBC about the mounting attacks against discussing systemic racism in history classes at schools. Over 20 states now having banned the teaching of critical race theory. She produced the 1619 Project with the New York Times, an interactive project that re-examines the legacy of slavery, the target of this right-wing backlash last year after the Trump administration threatened to pull federal funding from schools that use the 1619 Project in their curriculum. This is Nikole Hannah-Jones.
I think we're in actually a very dangerous period right now. When we look at what these laws are doing, you know, a lot of people have kind of scoffed at them. When you read the language of them, they appear very silly. But when you think about what this is actually trying to do, we know that it is narrative that allows us to enact really dangerous policies. It is narrative that allows citizens to kind of accept these erosions of civil rights. So it's not incidental that the same states that are introducing these anti-critical race theory, anti-1619 project laws are also introducing voter suppression laws. These things are going hand in hand.
So that's Nikole Hannah-Jones, Goldsmith.
You're free.
Yeah, and she's absolutely right. I mean, I think that these two things are deeply entangled in one another. I think that there is a state-sanctioned effort to prevent people from understanding our history, because if you prevent young people and people more generally from understanding the history of this country and how racism has, again, animated so much of our public policy decisions, then when certain voting rights or certain voting legislation is enacted to prevent people from having the right to the ballot box or having access to the ballot box in the way that they should, then you can ground it in a sort of ahistoricism that pretends that it is not something that is very intentionally attempting to keep Black people from exercising their right to the franchise. And because there is a recognition that the more people understand the history that has shaped what our political infrastructure looks like, from the Electoral College to gerrymandering, the more you realize how entangled that is in, again, in the history of slavery. And so all of these things, as Nikole said, absolutely go hand in hand and should be understood as such.
Amazingly, New York Daily News reported, watchdog group wants teachers to wear body cams to assure they don't teach critical race theory in Nevada district. But I'm going to leave that one there. And I want you to talk more about your book, how the word is passed. I'm going
to stop it right there. Did you just hear that? They're telling you in your face, fuck you. What did Biden say back in '94? These stupid motherfuckers that voted for his ass. I don't care what made them that way. I want them off the street. He was talking about our people. That crime bill under Clinton. I believe it was '94. You keep putting in office, like I said when I read Lamentations, you keep looking for people that hate you. You keep looking for them, for these very same people, to save you instead of calling on the Heavenly Father, Yahweh, and His Son, Yahweh Shai, which is exclusively for you, for our people. That's the whole point in this. There is no other way to do it. All right, so with that, excuse me for ranting, but it just irks you. A lot of our people still don't get it. So with that, once again, I hope whoever views this is edified. All right, because this is all done in the hopes of waking up the remaining hopeful elect, so this shit can fall. Tired of being tortured, and this is torture, day in and day out. No hope. At least for these things around us. There's nothing here for us. And if you got half a brain, you'd recognize that. It says a lot in and of itself. So with that, hey, shalom.